I was standing in that godforsaken warehouse in the industrial district of Newark when Marcus finally showed his face, and in that moment, with the wire pressed against my ribs and the weight of everything I'd lost crushing down on me, I realized that the woman who'd walked into her penthouse 6 months ago holding a bottle of Cristal was dead. She died the second she saw her husband and her sister sitting at her dining table in matching silk robes, laughing like they owned the place, like they owned her life. But before I tell you how I brought down an empire and watched the man who destroyed me get dragged away in handcuffs, before I explain how my baby sister became my greatest enemy and my dead mother's secrets became my salvation, I need you to understand something. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever given everything to people who saw you as nothing more than a resource to exploit, if you've ever been so successful that everyone assumed you had it all together while you were actually drowning, then this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe to hear the rest, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had someone you trusted betray you in the worst way possible. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Ava Mitchell. 6 months ago, I had it all. At 32, I was pulling in $250,000 at one of Manhattan's top financial firms, living in a Tribeca penthouse, married to Marcus Thorne, a corporate lawyer who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a magazine. 4 years of marriage, and I believed every word about building our future together. I also had Chloe, my younger sister. After our mother died when I was 19, I'd basically raised her. Now 27 and drifting between unpaid internships, she'd been living in our guest room for 3 months. I didn't mind. Being her safety net felt like love. Marcus encouraged it. He'd smile and say, "Family is everything, Ava. You're such a good sister." I thought he had a generous heart. That fall, I was working 80-hour weeks, leading a $3 billion merger deal. My boss promised me VP by 35 if I landed it. So I worked. I sacrificed. Marcus kissed my forehead when I stumbled home at midnight and told me he understood. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Marcus coming home early on days I'd be late. Chloe wearing expensive perfume I didn't buy. The way they'd go quiet when I walked into a room. But I was too exhausted to see it. Too trusting. The deal closed on a Wednesday in October. Champagne toast handshakes with men in $15,000 suits, the VP promotion confirmed for January. I bought a $400 bottle of Cristal and left the office at 6, excited to celebrate with my husband. I walked into our apartment quietly, wanting to surprise him. The lights were low jazz playing softly, and there they were at my dining table. Candles, wine, my wedding china, Marcus in pajamas, Chloe in a silk nightgown I'd never seen, laughing together like lovers, their body language intimate and familiar. The champagne bottle slipped from my hands. Marcus looked up annoyed. "Oh, you're home early. Guess the celebration's over." No guilt, no shame, just irritation that I'd interrupted. Chloe started her fake tears. "Oh God, Ava, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen. We tried to fight it, but we couldn't help ourselves. Couldn't help themselves. In my home, in my bed. With my money supporting them both." "How long?" My voice barely worked. Marcus stood completely at ease. "Does it matter? Let's be honest, Ava. You've been checked out of this marriage for years. You're married to your career, not to me. I'm just a trophy husband, right? When's the last time you actually saw me?" "I've been working for us," I managed. "For our future." "For your ego," he said coldly. "You're so obsessed with being the best that you forgot you had a husband." Chloe understands what it means to be present. She makes me feel alive. I looked at my sister. "I raised you. I paid for your life." She dropped her hands, and for 1 second, I saw her real face, triumphant. "And you never let me forget it, did you? Perfect Ava, always so successful. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Marcus sees me for who I am. He loves me." The words hit like poison. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. A relationship they'd been building while I worked myself to death to support them. I should have screamed. Should have thrown them out. But I was in shock, unable to process the betrayal's magnitude. So I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and left. I didn't take anything. I just left. I drove aimlessly for hours, finally ending up at a hotel in Midtown, paying cash for a room because I couldn't think straight enough to use a credit card. I sat on the generic bed in that generic room and stared at the wall until sunrise, trying to understand how my life had imploded in the span of 30 seconds. The next morning, I tried to access our joint bank account to pay the hotel bill. Frozen. I tried the backup account. Also frozen. I called Marcus and he answered on the first ring, his voice businesslike and calm. "I've initiated divorce proceedings," he said. "My attorney will be in touch. Don't try to access any joint accounts or assets. And Ava, I'd think carefully about how you handle this. You wouldn't want people at your firm to hear about how you've been so obsessed with work that you drove your husband into your sister's arms. That kind of thing raises questions about stability, about judgment. Just something to consider." He hung up before I could respond. That's when I understood this wasn't just infidelity. This was warfare. Within 24 hours, my firm's HR department called me in for a meeting. There had been anonymous tips submitted to the ethics hotline, they said. Allegations that I'd used insider information to advise clients, that I'd been making decisions while emotionally unstable, that I'd been behaving erratically. They showed me printouts of forum posts on industry websites, anonymous accounts suggesting I was unethical, unstable, that my recent success was suspicious. I recognized Marcus's handiwork immediately. He was a corporate attorney. He knew exactly how to plant seeds of doubt, how to weaponize compliance procedures, how to make allegations that were impossible to disprove, because they relied on perception rather than fact. My managing partner, the same man who'd promised me a VP promotion 48 hours earlier, sat across from me with his hands folded and said, "Ava, we think it's best if you take some time away. Given the circumstances, your judgment might be compromised. We can't afford any appearance of impropriety, not with the SEC already scrutinizing our industry. We'll call it a leave of absence, but honestly, I'd start looking for other opportunities." I was being fired. Not directly, but effectively. They were covering themselves, distancing the firm from me before the rumors could spread further. The promotion was gone. My reputation was destroyed. And I had no way to fight it because Marcus had been careful, strategic, making sure there was nothing I could trace back to him directly. I cleaned out my desk that afternoon, carrying 4 years of work in a banker's box, while former colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways. I was a cautionary tale now, a warning about what happens when you let your personal life spiral out of control. With no income, no access to my accounts, and my credit cards maxed out from Marcus draining them before freezing everything, I had nowhere to go. I couldn't afford the Tribeca apartment, couldn't afford a decent attorney, couldn't afford anything. I called my father, desperate, thinking that surely family would help. He answered on the 4th ring. Before I could explain, he said, "Ava, Chloe told me what happened. I can't believe you drove your husband to this. That poor girl has been crying for days, feeling so guilty, but Marcus says it's not her fault. He says you were never really present in the marriage, that you've always valued money and status over relationships. I thought I raised you better than that." I couldn't breathe. "Dad, she's lying. They've been having an affair in my home, in my bed, while I was working to support everyone. How can you believe her over me?" "Chloe doesn't lie," he said, and his voice was final. "She's sensitive. She needs support. And frankly, Ava, you've always been so independent, so self-sufficient. You don't need me the way she does. Figure it out like you always do." He hung up. I sat in my car outside my father's practice in Connecticut, where I'd driven hoping to see him in person, and watched through the window as Chloe emerged from the back office. She was there at his workplace, playing the victim, cementing her narrative. She saw me sitting in the parking lot, and for just a moment our eyes met. She smiled, actually smiled. Then she turned and walked back inside. I had nothing. No job, no money, no family support, no home. The life I'd spent a decade building was gone, dismantled in less than a week by 2 people I'd trusted completely. I ended up at a motel in New Jersey, the kind of place where you pay by the week and don't ask questions about the stains on the carpet. It cost $200 a week, and I had maybe $800 in cash money I'd kept in my wallet for emergencies. I spent my days applying for jobs and getting ghosted, my nights lying awake wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 2 weeks into my stay, someone broke into my room. I'd gone to a convenience store for instant coffee, and when I came back, the door was ajar. My laptop was gone. My few pieces of jewelry, even my good coat. I called the police, but they barely took a report. This was the kind of neighborhood where break-ins happened every day. But as I was checking what else was missing, moving around the sad little room in a daze, I looked under the bed for my emergency cash envelope, and there, pushed far back against the wall, was something that shouldn't have been there. A brown leather suitcase, old and battered, covered in travel stickers from places I'd never been. I pulled it out, confused. It wasn't mine. It was heavy, locked with a combination lock. And there was a luggage tag, the paper yellowed and old with handwriting I recognized instantly. My Aunt Eleanor's handwriting. My mother's older sister. Aunt Eleanor had died 3 years ago, or so I'd been told. A heart attack, sudden and fatal. I hadn't been close to her. She'd been eccentric, reclusive, living alone in upstate New York, working as some kind of consultant. We'd seen her maybe once a year at family gatherings, where she'd watch everyone with sharp, assessing eyes but rarely spoke. At her funeral, there'd been almost no one there. I'd felt guilty about that, about not knowing her better. My hands were shaking as I tried different combinations on the lock. Her birthday. My mother's birthday. Nothing. Then on impulse, I tried my mother's death date, the numbers that had been burned into my brain for 13 years. The lock clicked open. Inside the suitcase was $20,000 in cash, rubber banded in neat stacks. A burner phone still charged. A set of keys on a ring shaped like a small compass, and a piece of paper folded once with a message written in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. "They're watching you. Trust no one. Come to this address." She'd written coordinates rather than a street address. "Entry code is 1984. Burn this paper immediately. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you sooner. Your mother would want you to know the truth. The suitcase has been placed by someone I trust in a location you would end up if things went according to their plan. If you're reading this, it means you found it. It means you survived the first phase. Now come find me, or what's left of me. Eleanor." I read it 3 times, my brain struggling to make sense of it. What plan? Who was watching me? What truth about my mother? Eleanor had been dead for 3 years. This was insane. But I looked around that motel room, thought about everything that had happened, about how precisely Marcus had destroyed my life, about how quickly my father had turned against me, about that break-in that had stolen everything except this suitcase hidden under the bed. And I realized that maybe insane was exactly what my life had become. I burned the paper in the motel parking lot, used the cash to buy a used Honda Civic from a guy who didn't ask questions, plugged the coordinates into the burner phone's GPS, and drove north into the night. The coordinates led me to the Catskill Mountains, to a dirt road that wound through dense forest for miles, before ending at a small cabin that looked abandoned. It was 3 in the morning when I arrived, exhausted and terrified, and half convinced I'd lost my mind. But I punched in the code 1984, and the door clicked open. The inside of the cabin was not what I expected. From the outside, it looked rustic, neglected. Inside, it was a command center. Multiple monitors lined one wall, all dark. Filing cabinets, a large desk with a laptop closed. And covering every other available surface, walls, bulletin boards, even parts of the ceiling, were documents. Photographs, maps, articles printed from newspapers. String connecting different elements like something out of a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. I turned on a single lamp, afraid to make too much light, and started to examine what Eleanor had left behind. At the center of the largest bulletin board was a photograph of a man I didn't recognize. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of person who looked powerful and knew it. Under his photo, Eleanor had written, "Julian Croft, CEO, Omnicorp Pharmaceuticals." Around his photo were dozens of other images, board members, scientists, lawyers, and there near the bottom was Marcus. My Marcus. But this photo was old, maybe 7 or 8 years, and he was standing next to Julian Croft at what looked like a corporate event. Under Marcus's photo, Eleanor had written Asset Place 2019. 2019 was the year I'd met Marcus. My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the floor, staring at that wall, and felt reality shift underneath me. This wasn't an affair. This had never been an affair. This was something else entirely. I forced myself to stand to keep looking. There were documents about Omnicorp, about a drug called Solara that had been fast-tracked through FDA approval 5 years ago. Articles about its success, how it had become a blockbuster treatment for a specific type of chronic pain. And then stapled together and highlighted extensively medical journals and internal memos suggesting the drug had severe side effects that had been hidden during trials. Side effects that could be fatal. And there, in a folder marked with my mother's name, Diane Mitchell, were employment records. My mother had worked at Omnicorp. I'd known that vaguely. She'd been a research scientist, something with pharmaceuticals. But I'd been a kid when she died. I'd never asked questions about her work. According to Eleanor's notes, my mother had been part of the team that developed Solara. And according to a series of printed emails Eleanor had somehow obtained, my mother had discovered the side effects issue 6 months before the drug's approval. She'd reported it to her superiors. She'd threatened to go to the FDA directly. And then she died in a car accident. Single vehicle crash on a rainy night, lost control on a curve, went off a bridge. The police had called it a tragic accident. I'd been 19 home from college for Thanksgiving break. It had destroyed our family. But Eleanor's notes said otherwise. She'd investigated independently, hiring private investigators, security experts. She'd found evidence of brake line tampering of witnesses who'd been paid to change their statements of an internal Omnicorp memo dated 2 days before my mother's death with the subject line, "The Diane Mitchell Problem Resolution." My mother hadn't died in an accident. She'd been murdered for trying to do the right thing. I don't know how long I sat on that floor crying so hard I thought I'd break apart. Everything I'd believed about my life, my family, my mother's death, it was all a lie. And Eleanor had known. She'd spent years investigating, compiling evidence, hiding in this cabin because she'd known they'd come for her too. Eventually, I found the laptop. It powered on, and the desktop background was a photo of my mother holding me as a baby, both of us laughing. There was a single folder on the desktop labeled "For Ava." Inside were video files. I clicked the first one, dated 3 years ago, shortly before Eleanor's death. My aunt's face filled the screen, but she looked nothing like the woman I remembered. She was gaunt, her skin gray, her eyes hollow. She was dying. "Ava," she said, her voice rough, "if you're watching this, then the poison has finished its work, and you found what I left for you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to explain this in person. I'm sorry for so many things." She paused, coughing, and when she continued, her voice was harder. "Your mother was my baby sister, and she was murdered because she tried to stop Omnicorp from releasing a drug that was killing people in clinical trials. The side effects were buried, the data falsified, and when Diane threatened to expose them, Julian Croft ordered her death. They made it look like an accident, and for years I didn't know. By the time I figured it out, I'd already started getting sick. They poisoned me too, Ava, slow-acting, untraceable. I have maybe 3 months left." I pressed pause, unable to breathe, unable to process what I was hearing. "Marcus Thorne," Eleanor continued when I forced myself to resume the video, "is not who he says he is. His real name is Marcus Chen, and he's been working for Omnicorp since he graduated law school. He was placed in your life to monitor you, to make sure you never looked into your mother's death, to keep you distracted and controlled. Your marriage was never real, Ava. It was an assignment." The room spun. I thought I might vomit. "Chloe was recruited later, about 18 months ago, after you started making more money and could be useful as a pressure point. They paid her, promised her things. She was easy to manipulate because she already resented you. Marcus seduced her, turned her into an asset. What's happening to you now, the destruction of your career, your isolation from family, it's all designed to make sure you can't become a threat." Eleanor leaned closer to the camera, her eyes fierce despite her obvious illness. "But I've given you everything you need to fight back. The evidence is all here, encrypted on this laptop. My research, internal Omnicorp documents I obtained through sources I can't name, proof of your mother's murder, proof of the Solara cover-up, proof of Marcus's real identity. The password to the encrypted files is split into 3 parts for security. The first part is embedded in the code of this video file. The second part is with Ben Carter, a former Omnicorp engineer who worked with your mother. I've left his contact information in the secure folder. He's paranoid, he's difficult, but he's good, and he owes me. The third part you'll have to get from the FBI. Contact Special Agent Isabella Rossi. Give her the code phrase, Project Nightingale. She'll understand. Her mentor was investigating Omnicorp when he was killed in what the Bureau called a mugging. Isabella knows it wasn't random. She's been waiting for someone to come forward with evidence." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "You're strong, Ava. Stronger than you know. Your mother was strong too, and it got her killed, but you have something she didn't have. You have me, or at least what I'm leaving behind. Don't trust the system. Don't trust the authorities beyond Isabella. Julian Croft has people everywhere, but you can do this. You can bring him down, avenge your mother, and maybe, if we're lucky, save some lives in the process." She smiled, then sat in knowing. "I wish I could have protected you better. I wish I could have stopped them before they destroyed your life. But I was too late, and now I'm out of time. Use what I've given you. Make them pay. And Ava, when this is over, live. Really live. Don't let them take that from you too." The video ended. I sat in that cabin as the sun came up, processing everything Eleanor had told me. My marriage was fake. My sister was bought. My mother was murdered. And the company responsible was still out there, still making billions off a drug that was probably still harming people, still powerful enough to destroy anyone who threatened them. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But another part, a part I didn't know existed, was burning with something else: rage, purpose. A cold, calculating determination to make every single person responsible for this suffer. I spent the next week in that cabin learning everything Eleanor had compiled. I watched all her videos, read all her files, trace the connections she'd mapped out. Marcus wasn't just monitoring me. He'd been reporting to a handler at Omnicorp, a woman named Patricia Wells, who ran their corporate security division, which was apparently a euphemism for their team of fixers and spies. Chloe had been recruited through social media. They'd studied her, identified her vulnerabilities, her jealousy, her financial struggles, and made her an offer. $20,000 initially, with promises of more. Marcus had done the seduction part, making her feel special and valued and chosen, all while using her to control me more effectively. The affair had been strategic from the start. The break-in at my motel hadn't been random either. They'd been looking for evidence that I might have inherited something from Eleanor that I might know more than I should. The suitcase had survived only because Eleanor's contact, whoever they were, had hidden it well. I found Ben Carter's information in Eleanor's encrypted files. He lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, working as a freelance IT consultant under an assumed name. According to Eleanor's notes, he'd been one of the engineers who'd worked on Solara's clinical trial management system, and he'd discovered some of the data manipulation. He'd tried to report it internally and was immediately fired, threatened, and then bought off with a severance package that included a strict NDA. But he'd kept copies of everything, and Eleanor had found him. I used the burner phone to call the number Eleanor had left. It rang 4 times before a man answered, his voice sharp and suspicious. "Who is this?" "My name is Ava Mitchell," I said. "Diane Mitchell's daughter, Eleanor Martinez, sent me." There was a long pause, then "Eleanor's dead." "I know, but she left me information. About Omnicorp, about Solara, about what they did to my mother. She said you have the second part of the password." Another pause, longer this time. "If Eleanor trusted you, she left you something that proves it. What's the first part?" I'd extracted the password fragment from the video file's metadata, following Eleanor's instructions. It was a string of characters that meant nothing on its own. I read it to him. Ben made a sound that might have been relief or resignation. "All right, but we're not doing this over the phone. Give me 3 days to set up a secure location. I'll send you coordinates. Come alone. If you're followed, if you're working with them, I'll know and you'll never see me again." He hung up before I could respond. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I stayed in the cabin, barely sleeping, going through Eleanor's files over and over, learning everything I could about Omnicorp's structure, their assets, their weaknesses. I learned about their political connections, their lobbying power, the revolving door between their executive team and government agencies. I learned about Julian Croft's background, his ruthlessness, his complete lack of moral boundaries. And I learned about Solara's victims. Eleanor had compiled a database of adverse event reports, death certificates, medical records. Hundreds of people had died or been seriously harmed by the drug's side effects that should have been caught in trials if the data hadn't been falsified. Omnicorp knew, and they decided that billions in profit were worth more than human lives. By the time Ben's coordinates came through, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused, clear, ready. The meeting location was a parking garage in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 3 floors up northeast corner. I drove there in the Honda, constantly checking my mirrors for tails, taking random turns, doubling back. If Omnicorp was following me, I couldn't see them. Ben Carter was not what I expected. He was maybe 50, short and slight, with receding hair and thick glasses, wearing a windbreaker despite the mild weather. He looked like someone's mild-mannered uncle, not a man hiding from a corporate conspiracy. But his eyes were sharp and constantly moving, scanning the environment like a nervous bird. "You look like Diane," he said when I approached. She had that same stubborn set to her jaw. Wouldn't listen to anyone who told her to leave things alone. "Eleanor said you have the second password fragment," I said. I was too tired for pleasantries. "Eleanor said a lot of things. She also said you were a finance person, not an investigator. She said you were married to one of Croft's assets and didn't even know it." "That true?" I nodded. "I didn't know anything until 2 weeks ago. Now I know too much." "And what exactly do you plan to do with all this knowledge?" Ben asked. Because Eleanor, God rest her paranoid soul, she wanted to expose them, bring them down, make them pay. But she died before she could do it, and so did your mother, and so did a lot of other people who got too close. "What makes you think you'll be different?" "Because I have nothing left to lose," I said simply. "They took everything from me. My career, my marriage, my family, my reputation. The woman I was 6 months ago is gone. I don't care about protecting myself anymore. I just want to make them hurt the way they hurt me, the way they hurt my mother. Ben studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, that's a good enough reason, I suppose. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. This is the second fragment. The third is with the FBI agent Isabella Rossi. Eleanor trusted her, said she was clean, one of the few. You'll need all 3 parts to decrypt the master files, the ones with the original clinical trial data, and the internal communications proving the cover-up. I took the paper, memorized the fragment, then handed it back. Ben pulled out a lighter and burned it right there in the parking garage. There's something else you should know, he said, watching the paper curl and blacken. Omnicorp has people inside law enforcement, inside regulatory agencies, probably inside the FBI too. Going after them isn't just dangerous, it's suicidal. Even with all of Eleanor's evidence, even with my testimony, they have the resources to make this go away and make you disappear in the process. Then I'll have to be smarter than they are, I said. Ben laughed, a short, bitter sound. You sound just like Diane. She said the exact same thing right before they killed her. He met my eyes. I'll help you because I owe Eleanor and because your mother was a good person who deserved better. But don't mistake this for a winnable fight. The best we can hope for is to do some damage on our way down. Over the next 3 days, Ben and I worked together in a series of anonymous locations, moving every few hours using disposable devices. He was brilliant with technology, paranoid to the point of obsession, and completely committed once he decided I was legitimate. He'd kept copies of everything like Eleanor had said. Raw data files from Solara's clinical trials showing the adverse events that had been excluded from the final reports. Emails between trial managers discussing how to clean the data. Financial records showing payments to researchers and FDA reviewers. Your mother found all of this first, Ben explained as he walked me through the files. She confronted her supervisor, a man named Raymond Price, thought he'd help her report it properly. Instead, Price went straight to Croft. 2 weeks later, your mother was dead, and Price got promoted to VP of Research. He just retired last year with a $50 million golden parachute. Is he still alive? I asked. As far as I know. Why? Because I want him to watch everything he built fall apart, I said. Ben gave me an appraising look. You've got a mean streak under all that polish. Good. You'll need it. We worked on piecing together a comprehensive timeline, connecting every document, every payment, every death that could be tied back to Omnicorp's cover-up. Ben showed me how to create secure backups, how to set up deadman switches that would release everything if something happened to us, how to communicate without being traced. But here's the thing, Ben said on the 3rd day as we sat in a McDonald's parking lot reviewing our work. All of this evidence means nothing if we can't get it into the right hands. We need someone with the authority and the will to actually prosecute. That's where your FBI agent comes in. Eleanor said Rossi was building a case against Croft for years, ever since her mentor was killed. If we can give her what she needs, she might be able to actually do something with it. Then let's call her, I said. Not yet. First, we need to make sure you're protected. Right now, you're vulnerable. No money, no support system, legally estranged from your assets because of the divorce. We need to change that. We need to make you dangerous enough that taking you out becomes more costly than leaving you alive. And how do we do that? I asked. Ben smiled for the first time since I'd met him. We make some noise. We let Omnicorp know that someone has Eleanor's files. We make them panic. Panicked people make mistakes, and mistakes give us leverage. Over the next week, Ben orchestrated a series of subtle attacks. He created anonymous accounts on biotech industry forums and started asking very specific questions about Solara's clinical trials. He leaked carefully chosen documents to investigative journalists, not enough to prove anything yet, but enough to raise questions. He hacked into Omnicorp's external networks and left traces of his presence, digital footprints that screamed, "Someone is coming for you." The response was immediate and violent. Within 48 hours of Ben's first moves, someone tried to run me off the road while I was driving to our next meeting point. I managed to avoid the worst of it, but the Honda was totaled. Ben picked me up, shaken but unharmed, and we moved to a new location. They're scared, Ben said with satisfaction. Good, scared people make mistakes. But the attacks escalated. Ben's burner phone was compromised, forcing us to switch to a new communication system. Someone broke into one of our safe houses while we were out trashing the place, but not finding anything useful because Ben never kept anything important in an obvious location. We were being hunted, and we both knew we were running out of time. We need to contact Rossi now, I said after the safe house incident, before they figure out where we are and finish this. Ben agreed reluctantly. Using an elaborate series of digital hops designed to mask our location, he sent a message to an encrypted email address Eleanor had left. The message contained only 3 words: Project Nightingale, Diane's daughter. The response came back within an hour. Wrong channel, too exposed. Go to payphone at corner of 5th and Market, Harrisburg. Be there at exactly 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. It's a trap, Ben said immediately. They could have compromised Rossi. They could be waiting for you. Or it's the only way forward, I countered. Eleanor trusted her. That has to mean something. At 7:45 p.m., I stood at the designated corner, watching the payphone waiting. The street was moderately busy. People heading home from work, normal city sounds. Nothing seemed out of place. At exactly 8 p.m., the phone rang. I picked up. Hello? Is this Ava Mitchell? The voice was female, professional, cautious. Yes, your Aunt Eleanor contacted me 2 months before her death. She said if anything happened to her, someone from her family might reach out using the code phrase Project Nightingale. She said that person would have evidence about Omnicorp Pharmaceuticals and the death of Diane Mitchell. Is that you? Yes, I said again. There was a pause. Then, I'm Special Agent Isabella Rossi, FBI. My mentor, Special Agent Robert Hayes, spent 5 years investigating Julian Croft and died in what the Bureau officially called a robbery gone wrong, even though he wasn't robbed and he'd just told me he was close to a breakthrough. I've been continuing his work unofficially because no one else in the Bureau has the clearance or the interest. If you have what Eleanor said you'd have, you might be able to help me finish what he started. But you need to understand something. Pursuing this case has destroyed careers and ended lives. If you come forward, you'll be a target for the rest of your life. I'm already a target, I said. They killed my mother, they sent someone to marry me and control me. They destroyed my life systematically and deliberately. I don't care about the risk. I want them to pay. Another pause, longer this time. All right, then we need to meet properly in a secure location, but not yet. First, I need you to give me something that proves you actually have Eleanor's evidence. Something specific enough that I know you're legitimate. I thought about all the files Ben and I had reviewed. Your mentor, Robert Hayes, he was investigating a pattern of payments from an Omnicorp shell company called Meridian Consulting Solutions to various government officials and agency reviewers between 2018 and 2020. The total was approximately $7.3 million. One of the recipients was an FDA reviewer named Dr. Thomas Brennan, who fast-tracked Solara's approval despite red flags in the trial data. Brennan died of an apparent heart attack 6 months after the approval went through. He was 42 and had no history of cardiac issues. I heard Agent Rossi's sharp intake of breath. How could you possibly know that those payment records were sealed? Even I couldn't access them without a warrant I couldn't get approved. Eleanor found a way, and there's more, a lot more, enough to bury Croft and everyone who helped him. Where are you right now? Rossi asked, her voice urgent. I can't tell you that yet. Eleanor said to trust you, but she also said Croft has people everywhere. How do I know you're not compromised? You don't, Rossi admitted. But here's what I can tell you. I've been investigating this case against orders for 3 years. It's cost me 2 promotions and made me a pariah in my own office. I've collected pieces of evidence testimony from victims' families' financial records I obtained through questionable means, but I've never had the clinical trial data or the internal communications that would prove corporate knowledge of wrongdoing. Without that, any case I bring will be circumstantial at best. If you have that data, if you have Eleanor's files, then we can actually win this. But you have to come in. You have to let me protect you while we build the case. I thought about it. Thought about everything Eleanor had sacrificed, everything my mother had died trying to prevent. Thought about the hundreds of people who'd been harmed or killed by Solara, while Omnicorp raked in billions. I'll meet you, I said finally. But on my terms. I'll send you a time and location through an encrypted channel. Come alone. If I see any indication that you've been followed or that this is a setup, I'm gone, and you'll never hear from me again. Fair enough, Rossi said. But Ava, you need to understand what you're getting into. These people will do anything to protect themselves. They've killed before, and they'll kill again. Once we start this, there's no going back. Good, I said, because I'm not planning on going back. The meeting took 3 days to arrange. Ben set up the location, a state park in upstate New York, far from any surveillance cameras or potential ambush points. Rossi came alone as requested, dressed in civilian clothes and driving an unremarkable sedan. She was in her late 30s, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that had seen too much, the bearing of someone who'd spent years fighting battles everyone else had given up on. We met at a picnic table near a lake far from any other people. Ben watched from a distance, ready to intervene if things went wrong. "You look like your mother," Rossi said when she sat down across from me. "I never met her, but I've seen photos in the case file." "Everyone says that," I replied. "Did your mentor really have a case file on my mother's death?" Rossi nodded. Robert believed it was connected to the Solara case from the beginning. A scientist with concerns about a blockbuster drug dies in a convenient accident right before the FDA approval hearing. It was too clean, too convenient. But he could never prove it wasn't just bad luck and bad weather. The local police had closed the case, and without evidence of foul play, there was nothing to investigate. "Eleanor found evidence," I said. "Maintenance records showing the brake line on my mother's car had been replaced 2 weeks before the crash, which means someone knew they'd been tampered with. Witness statements from a mechanic who was paid $10,000 to lose his work orders. Phone records showing calls between Omnicorp's security director and a known fixer 3 days before the accident." Rossi's expression hardened. "Where are these records?" I pulled out a USB drive, one of several Ben had prepared. "Sample. Enough to prove we have the real deal. The rest is in a secure location backed up in multiple places with dead man switches that will release everything publicly if something happens to me or Ben Carter." "Ben Carter is with you." Rossi looked impressed. "Eleanor really did set you up with everything you needed." "She spent years preparing for this," I said. "Now we're going to finish it." We spent the next 4 hours going through everything Eleanor and Ben had compiled. Rossi made notes, asked questions, cross-referenced with her own investigation. By the time the sun started to set, she was leaning back on the picnic bench, looking simultaneously energized and exhausted. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is everything Robert was looking for. With this evidence, I can bring a case that the Bureau can't ignore. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bribery, racketeering. We can go after Croft and everyone in his organization. We can actually win." "How long will it take?" I asked. "To build a prosecutable case, coordinate with the DOJ, get warrants issued, set up the arrests and raid," Rossi calculated. 2 to 3 weeks if I push hard and call in every favor I have. But Ava, you need to understand what's going to happen once we move. The moment we execute those warrants, this becomes public. Your name will be attached to this. Your testimony will be crucial. You'll be cross-examined by the best defense attorneys money can buy. They'll try to destroy your credibility, dig into every part of your life, use your divorce and job loss against you." "Let them," I said. "I've already lost everything. The only thing I have left is the truth." Rossi studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this my way. You and Ben go into protective custody immediately. I'll set up a safe location with agents I trust absolutely. You don't contact anyone. You don't go anywhere without security. You don't take any risks." "Agreed." I looked over at Ben, who drifted closer during our conversation. He shrugged. "She's right. We've done the dangerous part. Now we let the professionals handle it." "Agreed," I said. The next 3 weeks were the longest and strangest of my life. Rossi placed Ben and me in a safe house in rural Virginia, guarded by 2 federal agents she'd personally vetted. We spent our days going through every document, creating a comprehensive narrative of Omnicorp's crimes, preparing for the testimony we'd eventually have to give. Rossi visited regularly, updating us on progress, bringing new questions from the prosecutors who were building the case. I learned that Marcus had disappeared. The divorce proceedings had been quietly shelved when I stopped responding to his attorney's demands, and now his law firm claimed not to know his whereabouts. Chloe was still at my father's place in Connecticut, apparently convinced she was safe. "They're going to run," Ben said when we heard about Marcus's disappearance. "Croft probably has exit strategies in place. He'll pull his key people out before the arrests happen." But Rossi was smarter than that. She worked with the State Department to flag Marcus and several other Omnicorp executives for surveillance at airports and border crossings. She coordinated with international law enforcement to monitor known safe havens. She kept the investigation compartmentalized, limiting knowledge to only those people she trusted completely. And on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after our meeting in the park, she called me with 4 words that made my heart race. "It's happening today." FBI SWAT teams hit 5 locations simultaneously. Omnicorp's headquarters in Boston, Julian Croft's home in Martha's Vineyard, the research facility where Solara had been developed, Marcus Thorne's law office in Manhattan, and my father's house in Connecticut. I watched it unfold on television from the safe house, Seeing news helicopters circling Omnicorp's building, reporters scrambling to understand why the FBI was raiding one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in America. Within an hour, major news outlets were reporting that CEO Julian Croft had been arrested, that federal prosecutors were alleging a massive fraud scheme related to the company's blockbuster drug Solara. Rossi called me that afternoon, her voice triumphant and exhausted. "We got him, we got all of them. Croft, Marcus Thorne, Patricia Wells from corporate security, 15 other executives and managers. The evidence was solid enough that no judge would deny the warrants. We seized computers, files, everything. It's over, Ava. You did it." "What about Chloe?" I asked. "In custody at your father's house." She tried to run when agents arrived, but she didn't get far. She's being charged as an accessory after the fact in conspiracy. Her cooperation might reduce her sentence, but she's going to prison. I felt nothing hearing that. No satisfaction, no anger, just emptiness. My sister had made her choices, and now she'd face the consequences. The trial took 8 months to begin. In that time, the full scope of Omnicorp's crimes became public. Ben hacked their servers and released thousands of internal documents, ensuring that even if the legal case somehow failed, the court of public opinion would destroy the company. Stock prices plummeted. Lawsuits from Solara victims piled up. The FDA opened its own investigation into the approval process. Several politicians who'd received campaign donations from Omnicorp suddenly remembered urgent reasons to return the money. I spent those months in protective custody, preparing for testimony, working with prosecutors, and slowly starting to rebuild my sense of self. Rossi became a friend, one of the few people who understood what I'd been through. Ben remained paranoid and prickly, but he was there, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. The trial itself was brutal. Marcus's attorneys tried everything to discredit me, painting me as a bitter ex-wife, seeking revenge, suggesting I'd fabricated evidence, questioning my mental stability. But the evidence was overwhelming. The clinical trial data showed clear patterns of adverse events being excluded. The emails between executives showed conscious decisions to hide the truth. The financial records showed bribes and payoffs. Ben's testimony as a former insider was devastating. And most damning of all, they had recordings. Eleanor, brilliant, paranoid. Eleanor had gotten someone inside Omnicorp to wear a wire. She had recordings of Julian Croft explicitly ordering the cover-up of Solara's side effects, of him discussing my mother's death with cold calculation, of him instructing Marcus on how to control me. When those recordings played in court, even the defense attorneys seemed to deflate. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Julian Croft, at 62 years old, received a life sentence without possibility of parole. Marcus Thorne received 30 years for his role in the conspiracy, including charges related to stalking and harassment. Patricia Wells got 25 years. A dozen other executives received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Chloe, who'd cooperated with prosecutors and testified against Marcus, received 10 years with possibility of parole after 7. My father attended her sentencing, crying, still unable to accept that his youngest daughter had knowingly participated in destroying her sister's life for money. I didn't attend. I'd said everything I needed to say in my victim impact statement. The day after sentencing, I received a call from Eleanor's attorney, a man I'd never met, who'd been handling her estate in silence. She'd left everything to me, not just the cabin and her research materials, but investment accounts, property holdings I'd never known existed. Eleanor had been wealthy, had spent years building resources specifically to fight Omnicorp, and now it was all mine. $47 million, give or take. I could have retired, disappeared, lived quietly somewhere far from all of this. But that's not what Eleanor would have wanted, and it's not what my mother had died for. 6 months after the trial ended, I established the Vance Mitchell Foundation, named for my mother's maiden name and our family name. The foundation's mission was simple: protect whistleblowers, fund investigative journalism support victims of corporate malfeasance, and pursue legal action against companies that put profits over human lives. I hired Ben as our Chief Technology Officer, giving him the resources and authority to build systems that would protect people trying to expose wrongdoing. I brought in former prosecutors, investigative reporters, victim advocates. We set up a tip line, a legal defense fund, a network of safe houses for people in danger. Rossi left the FBI a year later, tired of bureaucracy and politics. She joined the foundation as our head of investigations, bringing her skills and her contacts and her determination to hold powerful people accountable. The Foundation's first major case exposed a medical device manufacturer whose products were causing serious injuries. The second took down a pharmaceutical company that was bribing doctors to overprescribe opioids. The third helped a group of employees at a tech company reveal that their executives were knowingly selling user data to authoritarian governments. We became known, feared by some, respected by others. When someone had evidence of corporate wrongdoing but nowhere safe to take it, they came to us. When journalists needed funding to pursue expensive investigations, we provided it. When victims needed lawyers to take on massive corporations, we assembled legal teams that could fight on equal footing. 2 years after the Foundation launched, I stood in our new offices in Manhattan, looking out over the city, where I'd once had everything and lost it all. Rossi walked in, followed by Ben, both of them ready for our weekly strategy meeting. "We've got 3 new cases this week," Rossi said, setting down a stack of files. 2 pharmaceutical companies and 1 defense contractor. All serious allegations, all potentially winnable if we can get the evidence we need. Ben pulled out his laptop, already thinking about digital security, about how to protect sources, about how to gather proof without putting anyone at risk. I looked at them, these people who'd become my family when my real family had failed me, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose, peace. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction. I was doing work that mattered. I was making a difference. On my desk next to my computer and my coffee cup sat Eleanor's old brown suitcase. I kept it there as a reminder of where I'd come from, of the night I'd pulled it from under a motel bed and discovered that my entire life was a lie. That suitcase represented the worst moment of my existence, and also the moment I'd started to become someone new, someone stronger. Marcus was in federal prison in Pennsylvania, serving his 30-year sentence. I'd heard he spent most of his time in the law library, still trying to find loopholes, still convinced he could manipulate his way out. He'd written me twice long letters full of justifications and explanations, trying to make me understand that he'd been following orders, that he'd actually cared about me despite everything. I'd burned both letters without reading past the first paragraph. Chloe would be eligible for parole in 5 years. My father visited her regularly, apparently still trying to maintain a relationship with at least one daughter. He'd tried to contact me once a year after the trial, wanting to apologize or explain or something. I'd sent the letter back unopened. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, and I'd learned that it was okay to let them stay ashes. I thought about my mother sometimes, about the scientist who died trying to do the right thing. I'd visited her grave for the first time since Eleanor's revelations, stood there with flowers and tears, and told her that I'd finished what she'd started. I'd made them pay. I'd exposed the truth. And I was carrying on her legacy in the only way that mattered, by fighting to make sure no other family had to suffer the way ours had. I thought about Eleanor, too brilliant, paranoid Eleanor, who'd spent her last years building the tools I'd needed to survive and fight back. She'd known she was dying, had known she wouldn't live to see justice done, but she'd prepared everything anyway. She'd left me money, evidence, contacts, a roadmap for revenge and redemption. She'd saved me in ways I'd never be able to repay, except by doing exactly what I was doing now. The Foundation's work was never done. There were always more cases, more victims, more powerful people who thought they were untouchable. But that was fine. I'd found my purpose in the fight itself, in being the person who stood between ordinary people and the corporations that wanted to exploit or harm them. My life now looked nothing like the life I'd had before Marcus and Chloe's betrayal. I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who'd worked 80-hour weeks chasing promotions, who'd measured success in job titles and salary figures, who'd been so focused on her career that she'd missed the destruction happening in her own home. I was someone different now, harder in some ways, softer in others. I'd learned that success wasn't about money or status, but about living according to your values and fighting for what mattered. I'd learned that family wasn't always blood, that the people who stood with you in your darkest moments were your real family. I'd learned that revenge could be cold and calculated and deeply satisfying, but that real victory came from transforming pain into purpose. So here's what I want you to understand. If you're in a situation where someone is using you, controlling you, destroying you while pretending to love you, you need to know that you can survive it. You can fight back. You can win. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. You'll lose things and people you thought you needed. But on the other side of that loss is something better, yourself reclaimed and rebuilt, stronger than before. Don't wait for a suitcase full of evidence to appear under your bed. Don't wait for someone to save you. Save yourself. Document everything. Build your resources quietly. Find people you can trust even if it takes time. And when you're ready, when you've gathered your strength and your proof and your courage, strike hard and strike smart. Make them sorry they ever underestimated you. Make them regret the day they decided you were someone they could use and discard. And then when the dust settles and the battles are won, build something meaningful from the ashes of what you lost. That's what I did. That's what my mother tried to do. That's what Eleanor enabled me to do. And that's what the Vance Mitchell Foundation helps other people do every single day. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever had to choose between accepting an unacceptable situation and completely upending your life to escape it? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. And subscribe because I share more stories about fighting back, about corporate accountability, about turning pain into power. The system isn't designed to protect people like us. The powerful expect us to accept what they do to us, to stay silent, to be grateful for whatever scraps they throw our way. But we don't have to accept it. We can fight, we can win, and we can make sure that the next person they try to exploit has the tools and the support and the roadmap to fight back too. That's the legacy I'm building. That's the promise I made to my mother and to Eleanor and to myself. And that's the message I want to leave you with today. You're stronger than you think. You're more capable than they want you to believe. And you deserve so much better than what they're giving you. Now go out there and claim it.